Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
Tonight we welcome Ted Cruz. Ted is an attorney and partner in the law firm of Morgan, Lewis, and Bockius. And Ted is also former Solicitor General of Texas, David, which is a huge job in the Attorney General's office, means he argued numerous times before the U.S. Supreme Court.
So you can be called solicitor or general?
Ted will be just fine.
Well, of course, I told Gary in the beginning, I said, it's Cruz, because we had this guy that played for the Astros. And
I grew up in Houston, and I'll tell you, as a kid, it's a wonderful thing to go to the Astrodome and hear 50,000 people chanting, Jose Cruz! And about 8 years old, that was as close to heaven as I'd ever been.
It's the last time we've ever had anything to brag about it. Astrodome, or whatever it is that they play.
Minute Maid.
Minute Maid, sure. Anyway, glad to have you.
Great to be with you.
So what are you doing these days?
Well, practicing law and spending the vast majority of my time campaigning for U.S. Senate, for Kay Bailey Hutchison's seat. We've been campaigning since January, and the campaign has been going extraordinarily well.
Yes, I've seen some promotionals on your behalf, and endorsements just keep streaming across my PC. Freedom Works. Let's see, what else? Club for Growth. Yeah. You got Jim DeMint, who may be one of the craziest senators in the country. So, are you the Tea Party guy for this race?
Well, I am running as a proven conservative, and I'll tell you, it has been encouraging to see so many conservative leaders, both nationally and in Texas, unifying behind this campaign. I mean, I'm certainly fortunate to have enormous support and enthusiasm in the Tea Party, but ultimately that's for members of the Tea Party to decide. I'm running based on my record, and it has been deeply encouraging that we've really managed to unify conservatives and Tea Party activists and Republican women and grassroots leaders, and that's what it's going to take to win this race.
So are you this year's Marco Rubio?
Well, I will lead that to the primary voters to decide. I will say I think Marco Rubio's race in 2010 was the most important race in the country. And I will say also that people have made that analogy, and it's certainly true that Marco and I have similar personal stories and life stories. My dad's from Cuba. He grew up in Cuba. As a teenager, he fought in the Cuban Revolution. He was thrown in prison and tortured, and he came to Texas in 1957. He was 18. He didn't speak a word of English. He had $100 sewn into his underwear, and he went and got a job as a dishwasher making 50 cents an hour and paid his way through the University of Texas and started a business, moved to Houston, and worked towards the American dream. And that, I'll tell you, Gary, when I was a kid, my father used to say to me all the time, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go? And that question, more than anything, explains why it is I'm running for U.S. Senate.
Let's talk about this freedom idea, okay? Mm-hmm. Because there are parts of your resume and some of the videos that I watched which talks about you being a guy who can protect the Constitution, defend our sovereignty, mm-hmm. and promote maybe Texas values. I'm not sure about that. So let's go to this first part, this lawyer part and this Constitution. Exactly how is the Constitution, do you think, in jeopardy?
Well, I think the Constitution is threatened every day. I think it is threatened fundamentally by President Barack Obama, who I think is the most radical president this nation has ever had. And what we've seen over the last 2.5 years is power drawing into Washington, the federal government having more and more power over the economy, more and more power over our lives. And that culminated just last week with an historic and really tragic event for the first time in history, the U.S. debt being downgraded. And the reason it was downgraded is because politicians in Washington can't live within their means. They keep spending more than we have and exceeding the power of the federal government under the Constitution.
I think that's what Obama says. Exactly. I mean, he does say that we need to do something about this. In fact, he was after a huge deal, as you know. I mean, there's no disputing. He wanted some major $4 trillion balanced approach to the debt crisis.
Well, David, see, I think there is some disputing on that. What he wanted, he used the word balanced quite a bit, but what he wanted was $2 trillion in new taxes. And his approach to an economy that is at or near recession to over 9% unemployment is let's tax small businesses and let's make it even harder for them to create jobs. That is utter lunacy, and it would have cost even more jobs.
But you know what he didn't do, Ted? He didn't say, I'm willing to let us go into default on obligations that those very guys who were saying they're willing to do that had just voted to spend in April. We're 12 hours from insolvency, and people were actually saying, I am going to let it happen unless I get what I want on money they'd already appropriated. Was this not the most irresponsible thing that you have ever witnessed?
I agree. What we witnessed was incredibly irresponsible because what we saw was the President of the United States threatening default. Default was a scare tactic President Obama used because he didn't want to cut federal spending. Federal revenues are approximately $200 billion a month. Interest on the national debt is approximately $20 billion a month. There was never a risk of default, and if the president was responsible, a responsible president would say, the United States will never default on our debt. Whether or not the debt ceiling is raised, we have ample revenues to meet our debt, to service our obligations. The president didn't do that because he wanted to scaremonger, because he is so addicted to big government spending that's bankrupting our country, that he wanted to threaten defaulting on the debt to try to pressure Congress into doing what he wanted.
Or try to demonize Republicans. Because it looks like the Obama plan for the 2012 election is to just attack, throw mud, and attack some more, and not do anything positive. What happened to that great vision of a new America that Obama was talking about? I guess it's gone. But I want to ask you, what is your, the problem we face in this country is we got lots of folks not working. 9% unemployment grossly understates the true unemployment.
That's exactly
it's probably
right.
over 20%. We've got a lot of people who just, frankly, have given up trying to find a job. We have lots of people who are underemployed. So what is the Ted Cruz idea of how we get this country working again?
There are two basic ways to run an economy. One is a free market, free enterprise approach that encourages entrepreneurship, that trusts private businesses, small businesses, individuals to control their own capital, to put capital to work, and to create jobs. That is the model that has led the United States to be the most prosperous country in the history of the globe. The other model is government control of the economy. It's a model most of Europe has sadly adopted, government control and socialism, and it's the model that the Obama administration is trying to move us towards relentlessly, and it doesn't work. This administration has had a 2.5-year war on jobs and on small business. Policy after policy has strangled small businesses, whether it was the moratorium on offshore drilling, which I was honored to represent the U.S. Chamber of Commerce challenging successfully in federal court, or whether it is federal regulations trying to shut down drilling in West Texas because of a lizard, or whether it is the National Labor Relations Board trying to shut down a Boeing plant in South Carolina because the union bosses that Obama is indebted to don't want that plant to exist in South Carolina, or it's Obamacare, or it's cap and trade, or it's taxes. One policy after another is strangling small business, and 2/3 of every new job in this country comes from small businesses.
But apparently Texas is doing fine, right? And so he hasn't really strangled Texas, I guess you would say. I mean, we lead, you would argue, I'm sure, that we lead in job creation. Rick Perry has given 300,000 teachers a job in the last 10 years. With the price of oil, Ted, has allowed us to do some really great things here, as has the discovery of natural gas. Is that the Texas miracle? Is that, should we sit around and wait for every state to discover oil and gas deposits before we have an
first
economy
you have to
that
allow
grows?
drilling, David.
Yeah, we're not stopping it. It's happening.
Gary has a great point. We're not going to find out if there's oil and gas in other states because their states shut it down. New York has enormous shale gas reserves, and New York won't allow them to drill for it because their policies strangle that and shut that down. But more broadly, look, the difference, if you want to understand the two different models, you don't have to compare the United States and Europe. You can compare the state of Texas and California. They are two states that have pursued radically different approaches. California pursues high taxes, high regulations, strangling jobs, strangling small businesses, and their economy is reeling for it. Texas has pursued low taxes, low regulations, empowering and encouraging entrepreneurs to create businesses, and the results have been jobs have been exploding in Texas. More jobs from 2008 to 2009, more jobs were created in the state of Texas than all 49 other states combined. I mean, that's incredible.
$65,
and it's two different models.
$65 a barrel to $100 a barrel. I mean, we can't really say that there is a Texas model as long as you understand that we're dependent upon that energy industry.
Point to me one state in the country or one country in the world where high taxes, high regulation, strangling the private sector has worked and produced prosperity.
Well, all I know is that our tax revenue that we bring in puts us right below Turkey, Mexico, and Chile. Now, is that the model that we should be looking at? Are those the societies that we should be emulating? Because that's what this amount of revenue gets you, is banana republic status.
That's the sort of rhetoric. It's interesting you talk about banana republics. I mean, and that's the sort of rhetoric President Obama likes. And I got to tell you, I have never heard rhetoric.
I wish I heard him say that.
Well, what he does is he uses the language of dictators of banana republics. When he talks about going after business and confiscating assets, look at how he began his presidency. He began his presidency by firing the CEO of General Motors, by ripping up the contracts with the bondholders, and by effectively handing that company over to union bosses. It was disgraceful, and frankly, it was something that Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro and other Latin American dictators understand very well, because it is a strong man in government exercising power to draw power into their control. And it was wrong, and it was typical of what's happened for 2.5 years of this administration. It's what we need to stop.
But he saved the auto industry, apparently.
Well,
I mean, there's still people working, and we've got a couple of million people
cost?
still working, not million in the auto industry, because he and George Bush partnered up with the auto industry bailout.
Well, except that Ford didn't take any money, and Ford is done very well, so you didn't have to have government motors to do this. And my guess is some form of General Motors still would have existed. They may have gone through bankruptcy, reorganized, and the like, and come out a lot stronger, but that's the fundamental difference between the Democratic view of the world and the Republican view of the world. Let's talk about what's going on in Europe.
Okay.
You talked about Europe and the socialist model. We have riots, out of control riots, like I don't think that England has ever seen. People that are mad because they're not getting their entitlements anymore. Is that what we've gone to?
Think England is a socialist country?
Yeah.
If you look at, tragically, much of Europe is bearing the weight of a boulder on their shoulder, because much of the continent has adopted an approach that the government is going to take care of you from cradle to grave. And many of their citizens, sadly, are addicted and dependent on that government welfare. And that leads to, we look at what's happening in Greece, where the politicians spent more and more and more, and it's leading to economic chaos and collapse. That's the path this nation is on. A year ago, to suggest the United States debt would be downgraded would be viewed as crazy talk. As recently...
But it was right to do it. Standard & Poor's was correct, were they not?
Absolutely, they were correct. But 2 weeks ago, President Obama... It's interesting you said President Obama wanted to balance the debt. 2 weeks ago, a week before the downgrade, the Obama administration was saying, raise the debt ceiling and don't cut anything. That was their position as of 2 weeks ago.
Then we wouldn't have had a downgrade.
I guarantee you...
Because then we would have demonstrated that we know how to pay our bills, and there would be trust and confidence in the United States, which we lost, because we actually allowed it to go so far that people were wondering, do these people know what they're up to?
40 cents of every dollar that the federal government spends is borrowed, and it's borrowed from nations that are not our friends, whose interests are very different from our own. Now, your idea that what the ratings agencies wanted to see is an unlimited credit card for Congress. Frankly...
They wanted a deal. No, they wanted the credit agencies.
Standard & Poor's was very specific. They wanted a $4 trillion real cut. And what they said is that didn't happen. Interestingly enough, the Republican House passed a budget, the Paul Ryan budget, that did just that. But President Obama is not willing to limit spending. I'll tell you, I was the second candidate for U.S. Senate in the country to sign the cut, cap, and balance pledge. A pledge passed by the House that would have satisfied the rating agencies, that would have prevented a default, and President Obama said he would veto it. He's so addicted to government spending that he would veto it, and he's willing to default on the debt because he doesn't want to stop the spending.
Well, in truth, if we look at the deal that was actually made, it's $2.5 billion, maybe in cuts, maybe down the future, but the trend for the spending, if it doesn't get cut overall, the debts are going to continue to rise. So it's an unsustainable situation. So what's Ted Cruz's answer besides cut, and balance? Well, Republican president, Republican Senate.
Compromise is sort of important right now, right? I mean, we have to demonstrate.
What he means by compromise is revenue. David said, the Democratic line is we got to have revenue on the table, true. And I'm sure you agree that the present income tax system is a joke. It is pathetic. I mean, a lot of our brethren lawyers make a lot of money representing people on dealing with it, but the code ought to be simple. Why don't we just go to a flat tax? Put it on a postcard, no exemptions, no deductions for nobody. 3 rates, boom.
Gary, you are preaching to the choir, and I would certainly support any proposals that simplify the tax code, that move us closer to a flat tax or a fair tax, ideally even a consumption tax, and that lower the tax rate. It's interesting, David, you mentioned compromise. For some reason, when President Obama uses the word compromise, it always means raising taxes. I mean, that's his holy grail. What does he want to do? He wants to raise taxes. And why does he want to raise taxes? Because he wants to spend more and more of our money in the federal government and move us towards a European system, and that system doesn't work.
Unemployment compensation is hardly the threat to American democracy that he's had. All of the stabilizers are in place to keep an economy going when no one has any money, all right? That is all he's doing. That's all he's doing. It
doesn't keep the economy going when you kill jobs.
You don't think that people have to spend money so that businesses, seeing the demand, maybe hire other people?
See, and that's actually the difference. Who spends the money? It's not government. Barack Obama believes that when federal government bureaucrats spend money, it creates jobs. I'll tell you when you create jobs, when you empower entrepreneurs. Right now, there's over $2 trillion overseas. Why? Because the United States has the second highest corporate tax in the world. If you wanted to create jobs, you would dramatically cut the taxes on putting that money to work. You would dramatically cut the regulations. You would adopt a model, I'll use the analogy you used, more like Texas. There's a reason 1,000 people a day come to Texas, because this is where the jobs are, and it's because this model of empowering entrepreneurs works and strangling them in red tape and taxes doesn't.
I think I'm about to hear Remember the Alamo.
Works for me too.
So Ted, here's what I don't understand. I mean, we have a lot of spending that you'd like to do away with. So, which of these people would you like to announce are going to lose anywhere from 20 to 90% of their revenue? That would be Lockheed, that would be Humana, that would be Motorola, that would be Dell. How many NASA engineers are you ready to tell we don't need you anymore because we're
Obama's already done that.
Right. They're still there.
It's actually very interesting you ask that question because, one of the biggest lies in politics is that Republicans are the party of big business. That's just not true. Big business does great with big government. The huge corporations get in bed with the government. They have armies of lobbyists, and they get special treatment. In my view, Republicans and conservatives are and should be the party of small businesses, of entrepreneurs. And I don't have anything against big business. I don't think we should demonize them. I don't think we should go after them. But I have no interest in bailouts or special favors for any big business. I think we should remain a land of entrepreneurs. When my father came to this country, he didn't speak English. He had no money. He started as a dishwasher. He ended up going to work for IBM as a computer programmer, and then he started his own company, a small seismic data processing company doing oil and gas exploration, and he built a company with my mother here in Houston. That's the American dream, that someone not speaking English with no money at all can achieve anything, and we're in danger of losing that.
I have a question in terms of your dad. Did he do English immersion, or did he do bilingual education?
He did super immersion, which is he showed up here, and he was enrolled at UT, but he didn't speak English. So he did a couple of things. Number one, he signed up for Spanish 101. And he essentially reverse engineered Spanish 101. So when the teacher was standing up there saying, milk is leche, he would write down, leche is milk, and he'd just do it all backwards.
You have a good accent, by the way.
Gracias. Well, the other thing, though, that he did is he worked 7 days a week because as a dishwasher, he could eat on the job. And if he didn't work that day, he didn't eat because he didn't have the money to buy food. But on Saturdays, he would go, and he'd go to the movie theaters, and he'd watch the same movie 3 or 4 times. And, the human brain is an interesting thing. When you're sitting there and you'd listen to the movie in English once, twice, 3, 4 times, you just start to pick it up. And the simplest answer is he had an acute incentive to learn English because he was going to flunk out of school if he didn't. And so he learned it very quickly because he needed to, and that's part of opportunity. Everything we should be talking about should be expanding opportunity to work towards the American dream, because that's what has led to the incredible prosperity.
Here's why people might suspect that Republicans or conservatives, there's a difference, are friendlier to big business or wealth. If we want to talk about revenue, well, let's talk about wealth in the country. $86,000 family income taxed at about 14%. That's their rate of paying. Those at $49 million, all right, and there's 400 of them, they're at 18%. They have more money than 150 million Americans. When are you going to say, that crowd needs to help us pay the bills?
It's interesting. Class warfare is what President Obama always falls back on. And I'll tell you a couple of things. Number one, it doesn't work. It's not the American way. It's contrary to our values. And there are a few realities. Right now, roughly 50% of Americans are not paying income tax at all. And the top 5% is paying the majority of taxes in this country. Now, you can keep taking the approach President Obama is, which is just ratchet up taxes, and crush the small businesses, the entrepreneurs. And what happens is exactly what's been happening, which is jobs and productivity go away. It doesn't work. It's a great idea. You know who also was a fan of that? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter loved that philosophy of tax the businesses, tax the business owners, shut down. I mean, you remember.
Do they have a responsibility to pay anything at all? Business? Do you believe they do?
Okay.
Because they're at 10% of personal income taxpayers as far as the general revenue of the United States. They pay $170 billion. In 2010, personal income tax brought in about $890. So, is that their fair share, or should they be a little bit? Can we get at least 3% more from them, since we're talking about balancing a budget?
What's interesting, David, is you're using the pronoun they when you talk about businesses. I've never seen a corporation. Corporations don't breathe. They're not entities. They're legal fictions. They're sadly enough created by lawyers. When you put taxes on corporations, there isn't some magic Daddy Scrooge that pays it. Instead, what happens is they raise the prices, and when you go to the store and buy gas, when you buy clothes, when you buy food, we, the consumers, pay those taxes. Now, I'll tell you why politicians like corporate income taxes. Because they hide the taxes. And politicians love taxes to be invisible. If they tax the corporation, they just magically appear in our prices, and we, the consumers, don't realize we're paying more in taxes. At the end of the day, only human beings pay taxes because they're the only things that have ever created wealth, that are ever walking about producing productivity. And so the notion that let's just tax the corporation, look, the most simple principle in economics, David, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
David doesn't understand it. He thinks there is. Ted, I want to talk to you about the political scene. We have Congress's ratings now nationally at 10%. I think Obama's now gone down to 37%. That's also 3.7 times what Congress is rated. Yeah. And, of course, Congress is Republicans and Democrats. So how do we get this ship of state turned around when Congress is thought of so poorly?
Now it's time for the 2010 mandate story, right?
Well, look, yes. Now that you mention it, that's a great segue. Thank you.
Can't wait to hear it.
Look, a big part of the reason Barack Obama, and you're going to like this part, a big part of the reason Barack Obama got elected in 2008 is Republicans weren't standing for anything. In 2006 and 2008, the Republican Party had gotten fat and happy. They were addicted to spending. All they wanted to do was get reelected and to buy votes to do it. And a big part of the 2008 election was the American people saying no and enough. And I'll tell you, it was actually the best thing that ever happened to Republicans, because that kick in the teeth resulted in 2010 a wave of new leaders that are strong, principled conservatives that believe in limited government, that believe in free market principles, that believe in the Constitution, standing up to the establishment that just wants to use your word, compromise with the Democrats in continually growing the size and power of the government.
Do they understand the power of the Commerce Clause? These new people? I don't know if they do.
The Commerce Clause, as you know, is the avenue.
Pretty vast power, wouldn't you say, Ted?
It is under President Obama's view, because under President Obama's view, the Commerce Clause of the Constitution enables the U.S. federal government to do anything. It's the justification for Obamacare. Now, it's also why Obamacare has been struck down by two different federal courts. And I'll make a prediction to you. When Obamacare gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, I predict, will strike down the individual mandate as beyond the authority of the Commerce Clause.
That's quite a prediction.
It is a prediction, and you can hold me to it in a couple of years when the court decides.
And hopefully by then we'll have a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House.
I think Ted will have to concede that Obama does not control the Supreme Court. He doesn't have.
He's trying.
He doesn't have a majority there.
Not yet.
It's a conservative majority, and it's been there for a good while. And it may do what you want it to do, but it's not going to be because Barack Obama wants it. Fair enough? And just say yes or no, please, so we can move on.
Yes or no?
Okay. Ted, thanks for being here, man. Great show.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
We invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Click on the program bar, red, white, and blue. Watch the shows, a follow-up discussion, and until next time, get informed and get active.